very interesting, very scary. These people are potential time bombs. They've got to be handled with certain care, very much. Um, they seem to fit a profile that I'm actually studying. Um, and yes, they've been implicated in gang violence. They've been implicated in, yes, mass murders or mass homicide. Rather use the word homicide. Um, and the thing is, they can be cured, or the thing is, you can't cure them of the actual desire to control something or people, but they've got to be managed properly. They've got to learn somehow, but it's not just about them. You've got to basically say that they are the ones who are, well, I believe they are leaders. Many of them would be scientists. Many of them would be people who are task-oriented people, right? Who love to control something, and unfortunately they get bullied a lot, but it's not bullying as in, it's not usually physical bullying. It's usually like that example of that teenager getting bathed by his mother. You know, parental control, dealing with parents controlling a child, babying a child, is a clue. It's a huge clue, because there's a lot of people in this world who are adults who have to live with mum and dad, or one or the other. It's very humiliating for them, and this is a very good chunk of data. And you know, it's really scary. And I've met somebody also who claims to be a self-aware. Well, he doesn't say he's self-aware in those words, but he calls himself someone with narcissism. And he worked with me and he worked in a mental health sheltered workshop type environment. And yes, he could be quite explosive. But it's not. But there's probably more of these around than you think. Many of them, and the thing is one thing I believe that's missing from their lives, a place called work, a place called a friend. The last example was really amazing. He dumped some pretty fascinating, very powerful, insightful data. So he can't work and he can't socialise. That is the most humiliating pair of circumstances you can have. The only thing is, although the amazing thing is, he does have a wife, but there seems to be something lacking. It's not him. I don't want to blame him. I tend to be for these people, because no one wants to clean them up and in a way that's positive. They just want to treat it like a disorder and apply heavy discipline. But disciplining people like that is not a good idea. There's one thing missing. They've got to learn, because, well, again, it's not learning from their part. There's got to be an input, positive input from people. It's not just about them lifting their game, because if they can't work, they can't socialise, well, they've actually lost something of their selves. The thing is also, and I'll just put it in a nutshell, many of them would have Asperger's syndrome. I'd say that's the most likelihood of issues, right? Asperger's syndrome, which means you're a task-oriented character. Now, in the workplace, task orientation has become something that the workplace has basically condemned, or they've said, look, you've got to learn to be more people-focused. So there's a lot of social engineering going on, or mind engineering going on with people with Asperger's syndrome. They're exploding into rages. They call them meltdowns. A meltdown is a fact of Asperger life, deep depression, and yes, it results in violence. They even fight each other. They're pitted against each other, and they've been dubbed as unempathetic. And that's the thing. But the problem is there's a lot of problems with it. Goes very deep. Religion also plays a part. Brainwashing by, well, it's been implicated that religious organisation, just the church, a normal suburban church, can cause some really crazy stuff to happen to these people, and it screws their heads up. And in fact, it's worse. It's like a living hell. So many of these people are actually perceiving that they're going to hell. It's like they are Christian, right? Imagine this. You're a person who perceives themselves as a Christian, but you then think yourself as not a Christian, and you're sort of like living a duality of Christianity and non-Christianity. And when people end up like that, that's a pretty horrible state for a person's mind to be in. And although it's an illusion, it's like a living hell. It's an obsession with hell. Now, these people really are nice people if you can look after them, but the thing is, they're designed to lead, they're designed to work very, 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 very hard, I mean, and focus on a task. So a task-oriented person would be considered the person who's, Asperger's would probably be a scientist, someone who's obsessed with something specific, like the thing we're using here to communicate, the computer, the internet, electronics, technology, innovation, right? Now they're being globally they're being abused, and many of them could be business people, could be CEOs running the various firms, but most of them, 85% of people with Asperger's syndrome, they say are out of work. The fact is they've been told they're too obsessed with machines. They think the workplace culture is run by IQ 90 to 110, which forms the bulk of the population. So therefore, when they hear so much, the last guy was providing some really good information about chatter, about noise. These people do not like noise. Now, these people have been oppressed. They've been told they can't work, but they can't socialise. Most of them don't even have a woman or a man. So you can imagine a person who's been stripped of their job entitlements. They end up on a disability pension, or they end up doing manual labour, like labouring in a construction site, or supermarket checkout chick or checkout operator, which is really humiliating in itself. And then after that, then you lump on top of that, but they can't support themselves like a normal person has money, therefore a home, therefore and of course if they have a relationship, they have a double income, or they've got friends to support them if they fail in the job. So imagine a life without a home, without living in mum and dad's place, or living in a housing department squalor, or housing estate, whatever it's called in the world, public housing it's called. And you're living with other people who've got, issues like that too, fighting and crime, and you hear all this banging and screaming, and police are being called. It's all this terrible crap. Imagine a life where you've got no control over anything. You're just hanging there. You got no wife, you've got no husband. You're all alone. Then, of course, you worry about everything. You worry about you're alone, something goes wrong in your unit. You think, oh, crap, what if I waste water, and what if it costs too much money, I'm on a pension, or I've got to live, what if I lose my job, what if this, what if that, and you've got no one to talk to. What if the only thing, and then after that, you lump on top of that, you're depressed. You've had a run-in with a religious organisation known as the church, and you're fearing hell every living day of the week. And then, of course, you can develop this terrible duality where and that's the thing, is it true that they're really unempathetic? But the thing is, it may not be true, because when they're worried about everything, when they've got nothing to live for and they've got no hope, they're preparing to die in their minds, even though it's fake, and they may wake up out of the funk and think, oh shit, what the fuck was I thinking? What the hell was this? Bloody hell, my life just shot by. Fuck that, pardon the language, but that's the language that they would use. It is terrible. And that's the thing, they've got nothing to control. So when they confront something like, well, again, physical violence is the worst level, but it's because when they're being told by, and it's what we call being oppressed. It's what we've been called, being repeatedly told, you are worthless, you suck shit, you're bad. They're meant to lead or do something big. So if they're meant to be a CEO or some job do something they like, a person with Asperger's wants to take a badge, so that person might be obsessed with computers. So he wants to say, look, I want to put the computer on my chest and say, I'm a programmer. I'm an innovator. But when they've got that badge removed, and they really want husbands and wives too, and they study for university a lot of the time, there's so many killers that were, the Joker example, what's his name? James Holmes would probably fall into that category. That's a very scary thing. And now we've got probably, you say 6 million of these characters. Well, There's probably more, yes. So yeah, when you've had everything stripped from you and you're facing people, well, you're going to basically either run from them or you're going to attack them. It's kind of a strange duality where sometimes you do both. Some of them, of course, are very good at firing words as bullets. You know, you hear, and a lot of them are gangsters. A lot of them would be gangsters, and you wouldn't. Normal people say that they're worthless. They refer to them as bottom feeders, and it's basically a poverty trap. It's almost like almost like the Bronx, that kind of personality, the Bronx attitude, poverty trap, which means you got no money, you got no way of lifting yourself up, getting a job. You can't get a job anywhere, or you're working in substandard. Many of them are migrant type, you know, of many colours. Some of them are whites, of course. It's very depressing. And some of them might lose their empathy. I don't know, but the fact is, we'll just say that if you've got all these obsessions apart, you know, you love your task, so you rip off your task. You say you love computers, right? But people are saying you suck because you love computers, or the church says you're a sinner because you're too obsessed with your computers or an idolater, right? Bollocks to that, rubbish. It has to be managed, but if it's done for you know, if you're being yourself and you just, you know, so a lot of these people might say, for argument's sake, oh, I can't get a job in the computer industry, so I think I'll just rip off that computer stuff. Well, people are teasing me about it or making me feel bad. The church is saying I've got to give it up until I get moderated. So then they put on a mask. So they'll take the mask and they'll say, okay, this mask could be, I'll try and be normal. And of course they go mad. They'll put them, and they can't replicate the behaviour very accurately. So they'll put on a mask and say, all right, maybe the mask will be, and a lot of them work in jobs that don't relate to their interests. So they might, instead of working in computers, they might work as a travel agent, which they don't like. And they probably can't even enjoy the benefits of being a travel agent, as in holidays, which is really sad. So they put on a mask and say, okay, and they might change their interests. So, I mean, I don't know, it's hard to use an example, but a more specific example I'm studying are people who wanted to change the photocopier industry, and we call them copier industrialists or toner heads. Now they seem to occupy that very dangerous demographic. To detect one when they're all wearing masks is like, well, I mean, the thing is they wanted to change the industry, right? Make it a more equitable industry, make it less about, because the thing is, normal people are about money, greed, and selfish, and they're selfish, and they form their own crowdsourced majority rules, but really they're not designing equipment that makes things well. But a person who's obsessed with equipment says, I've got a computer on my chest, I'm great at computer programming, will say, well, I can design, if they do it for the better of mankind, well, that's different. But if they've been told they suck, well, they might even, and they've tried to give it up, well, maybe then they'll do it selfishly and exalt themselves, kind of thing. But the thing is, if we're talking, for example, the photocopier demographic, copier industrialist, toner head, whatever you call them, they're very dangerous if you're not managing them properly, because that's, you know, but an example, that's a good example about a mask, because a toner head or a copier industrialist can easily say that they love the photocopier industry, they love what they do, but they can't do it, they get mocked for it. So what do? They'll say, well, we'll take photography, as in the camera equivalent, put that on as a mask, and that's sort of very similar but different, because a lot of them were creative with photocopiers. Or some of them might say toner head, well, they might transliterate that, because many of them hit the drugs, they hit the marijuana because they're so depressed, right? The church has brainwashed them, they're fearing everything, and they can't access the industry. They've got to re-engineer their brains. So what they do, I've met them, I've dealt with them. I've dealt with one character who led me on to others, and there's an internet group. And they say it could be an example of toner head, right? Photocopier industrialist, toner, ink, dry ink. Then they'll take the word toner and they'll put the word S in front of it because they've taken marijuana, and they'll say stoner head, for example. So it's a mask. Or they'll just change their interests, they'll change their face, and actually they'll forget what they were. And that's very destructive to a human mind. But only a person who knows what they're doing can detect them. Got to go, but thank you very much for that insight.